So here in the Collector's Corner, we like to talk about interesting things happening in the world of collectibles. We're talking about things as comic books, trading cards, action figures, any of those fun things that we all love to collect. Sometimes from a speculation standpoint, sometimes just from a collecting standpoint. But at the very least, we always hope it's something that you will find worthy of discussion. Here is like what we like to talk about in the Collector's Corner. I totally butchered that segment setup, but that's enough. Let's just go ahead and get into it. All right, so you see the graphics on the screen here tonight. These are my selections for tonight's Collector's Corner. I'm going to run through these kind of quick and talk about why I selected them in particular. And then anyone, obviously, if you want to comment in the Rogues Gallery, feel free to comment on these selections. And also maybe offer up your own suggestions if you have anything that you've heard about or you think is worth talking about. Okay, so my big speculation play, in all honesty, has changed from when I originally made these selections. So the speculation play, for those people that are curious about it, it's probably at this point going to be Thundercats #1 from 1985, which is the book that's there in the center. You're going to want to do your research on this book, though, because there were second printings and different variations. So you want to look at, in particular, if you look in the little corner box there, where the number issue is #1. The other side, it has the price. You want to pay attention to that little box right there. That's what's going to tell you. As well as down at the bottom, you see it says star in the little white box, and it's got some information there. Sometimes that's a UPC code. So you're going to want to research this before you pick them up, because you might actually pick up a second print, which the second print is actually more valuable than the first print. But anyhow, you just want to be knowledgeable about which version of this book that you pick up, because there actually are different variations and they have wildly different values. Okay. But the reason I picked Thundercats #1 from 1985, and we're going to highlight this as a speculation play for this evening, is because of the fact we're going to talk about it when we get into pop culture, but there was actually a movie announcement for actually Thundercats. So that's why I'm picking that. We're going to get we're going to get more into that a little bit later in the show, but let's go ahead and cover the other two. The other two books I highlighted for this evening, the first one is Rom, the Space Knight #1 from 1979. #1, this is just a great book. It's a great character. But secondly, this book is interesting because this book wouldn't have been able to be on this list, because this book was actually going for anywhere from $40 to $50 and higher. And there's actually been a pullback on this book. A couple years ago, there was some announcements that Hasbro intended to develop a ROM Space Knight movie. And there's been some rumblings that that's still going to happen, which has caused the book to kind of spike a little bit here and there. But there has been some pullback on this book. So if you want to pick up a copy of Rom the Space Knight, I'm thinking now might be the time to get it, because you can get one for $20 or less. And there seems to be a pretty good supply of them on places like eBay. Not Mercari so much, but on eBay, there's quite a few copies you can pick up pretty cheap. So if you think there might be some interest in Rom the Space Knight moving forward, now would probably be your time to take a look at picking up Rom the Space Knight #1, because there's been a pullback. It's cooled down a little bit, so maybe it's now the time to pick it up if you want to pick it up. I think it's worth owning just because it's a great book. I love the character. All right. Our third one for this evening is Spawn #9 from 1993. This is the first appearance of Angela. Now, the thing that's interesting about Spawn is Todd McFarlane has just recently announced what he's calling the Spawn universe. And he has a whole bunch of different things he has planned to do with the Spawn character in terms of expanding the universe and adding more titles to the Spawn, comic book series, and basically fleshing out and building up that universe even more than what they've been building over the last 300 plus issues since Todd has created Spawn. Now, what's really kind of cool about this book is, in addition to it being an interesting Spawn kind of book to own, because it is a great Spawn book just to begin with, the second thing that's interesting about this is that Angela is in this. Angela is considered to be, I think, a Neil Gaiman character. And it's kind of unusual because Angela actually kind of exists right now in the Marvel universe. So this is an unusual kind of book. At one point, there was rumors that Angela might actually show up in an upcoming Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And in a recent Guardians of the Galaxy series that was published by Marvel Comics, Angela was actually one of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So this is an interesting book to purchase and hold because you've got an interesting Spawn angle, right? But on the flip, you've also got kind of an interesting kind of like Marvel Universe, maybe Guardians of the Galaxy angle as well. But for me, it's just a really great book to own. It's just a really great story. It's a really interesting character. But anyhow, that's the third pick for this evening, Spawn number 9 from 1993.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know a little bit about the whole controversy with Neil and Todd. I believe there was actually a pretty substantial lawsuit that happened between the two of them at one time, and kind of took it really kind of was looking at that whole work for hire type of issue and everything like that. And it's kind of ironic because obviously, Todd McFarlane is a creator himself, and it was one of the founders of Image because he felt that obviously Marvel was not treating artists, correctly, creators in general correctly. They decided to make their own company. And then a few years later, he was basically accused of doing all the terrible things that were done to him.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. You can definitely delve into it, looking into it more on the internet. There's actually an interesting on Amazon Prime. It was at Amazon Prime. I think it was like Image United or something like that. It was an interesting documentary actually about Image Comics. It's actually pretty cool. And there's lots of stuff about Todd talking about his new Spawn universe as well, because he was really making a big push for it and really hyping it. But a lot of the early Spawn books are really kind of fun and kind of cool, and they kind of encompass that 1990s kind of comics era in a really interesting sort of way, because they have kind of a lot of the tropes and all the fun things, but those books are still pretty good too. You know what I mean? They're not quite the devoid of content that some of the other books are sometimes, rightly criticized for being, just kind of devoid of content and just kind of crazy, flashy splash pages. But Spawn is actually a pretty interesting character, and it's been a fun book for a really long time. And so I just think this is kind of interesting. And it's weird too, because you basically in Spawn number 9 right now, you kind of have like a Marvel character and an Image Comics character like colliding in a book. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's just kind of a weird kind of a thing how all this is kind of turned out. But anyhow, I think it's for people who are collectors, people who like comics, people who are looking for different kind of books to kind of pick up. The thing that's interesting about all these books is if you keep an eye out for them, you can get decent copies of all of these books for basically $20 or less. Wow. The Thundercats one after tonight, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case anymore, because that news announcement about the Thundercats movie seems to be kind of catching on with people. So this book might be going up right now as I'm speaking. But at the time that I selected it and the time that we actually went live on this show, you can still pick up a decent copy for about $20. So it's kind of a fun way to kind of get into the comics, collecting and speculation kind of era. Again, these are just my recommendations. I'm not guaranteeing that these books are going to go up in value or anything like that. These are just kind of fun things to talk about. But like I said, these are the selections for tonight's Collector's Corner.
Very, very cool. Well, I actually have a thing for Collector's Corner too, and it does involve people that might want to try to find like an entry point into something, as opposed to something, again, that is already well established and maybe you would rather like just try to sell. This is something that people I think might be interested in trying to acquire. So I've talked about this before. I mentioned actually a lost opportunity that I had recently, which was that I was at Target and I saw that they have these Marvel Kenner action figures, right? And for people that don't realize it, Kenner doesn't technically exist anymore. It was acquired by Hasbro. And so I'm just showing you some prices here. Like this is the Hulk. This is the Hasbro Marvel Legends line, specifically the Kenner Hasbro Marvel Legends line, because Marvel Legends is a huge toy line, obviously, but this is specifically their sort of retro Marvel line. And you can see here, like this is a Hulk is going for like $17.99 on eBay. We've got like Magneto going also for $17.99. Captain America going for $16. Spidey going for $19.99, and that's about the top end that I've been seeing these things going for is around $20. So recently I had been at Target. These are Target exclusives. So apparently they're not available at any other retailer. There is a Hasbro Plus version of these figures, at least some of them. Some of them do come in these 2-packs. In fact, next to that Spider-Man picture, you can see one of the 2-packs that has Cyclops and Iron Man. As I understand it, Cyclops is not available yet, loose on card at Target. He's not, but what Target has done is, even though some of these figures are out in both versions, in other words, there's the Hasbro Plus version that comes in a 2-pack, then Target is actually making their own version that comes on a different card back. So like the Spider-Man that you get in one of these 2-packs from like Hasbro Plus. I'm sorry, right? Hasbro Pulse, right? I think Hasbro Pulse is actually what.
Yeah, it's Pulse.
Yeah, Hasbro Pulse. Hasbro Post. I can't speak tonight. Hasbro Post Pulse. Jeez, Hasbro Pulse. They do the 2-packs, and some of the same figures are now available both in retail at Target and through Hasbro, but the card backs are different. So anyway, a while back, I had been in Target. I found out about these completely randomly because I usually check out the toy section at Target when I go shopping for groceries. And I happened to see a Daredevil figure, and I didn't buy it, and I felt really bad afterwards because I was like, hey, it looks like those figures are going for almost double if you flip them on the secondary market, if you go to eBay or something like that. And I was like, dang, I wish I had bought that. So the next time I was in Target, I went ahead and looked again to see what they might have available. And I had a sort of pleasant surprise that there were quite a few figures available. Unfortunately, the one they didn't have was the Daredevil. They didn't have Daredevil, but they did have some other figures. And I'm going to go ahead and show them here on the air, the ones that I acquired recently just this week at Target. So the key thing here is to remember these things are available in the wild. That's what I think is nice, is that I've always thought the thrill of the hunt is a lot of fun when you're collecting anything, but in particular action figures and toys. And some of this stuff I'm going to go ahead and probably just keep, but some of it I'm looking at probably flipping within the next couple of months. Especially what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until this stuff is no longer available in stores. So I was lucky enough, I did get the Hulk. So this is a really kind of unique figure in the line because it's got like a very different kind of sculpt, and you can see that it's actually done very well, where he's much bulkier than the other figures. In fact, let me take out another figure to compare him to. Oh, here's Spidey. So we got Spidey here. This is probably one that I would keep, by the way, for my personal collection, or even maybe give to one of my kids, because I do have some of my kids really do like Spidey. So you can see what the card back looks like there.
Yeah, the card backs are really cool.
What's that?
The card backs are really cool.
Yeah, this one's very classic. This is a very classic Spidey pose. It's also neat. They have like these little info things on the back, that explain stuff about the character. And they're like little quotes because it's actually, if you look, they're in different languages. So like his says, high above the ground, swinging through the streets, Spider-Man stops criminals that seem impossible to beat. And a lot of them rhyme.
Huh.
So it's kind of neat.
Huh.
And I know that I think Spider-Man is kind of unique in that the Hasbro version, the Hasbro Pulse version, actually has a different quote on the back. It's not the same one.
Huh.
But to compare the sculpts, you can see, because Spider-Man kind of looks like his body type is very similar to all the other figures in the line. You can see they really did a great job with the Hulk in terms of giving him height, right? And also bulk.
Yeah, that's cool.
In fact, the one that I'm really hoping for that's not out is I really want a Thing. I'm hoping they're going to come out with a Thing in this line, but probably very similar to the sculpt that we see for the Hulk. I think that'd be really cool. Here's the Human Torch figure.
That's cool.
And by the way, he's very similar, I think, also to Iceman. Iceman has kind of got a very similar kind of look because he's kind of transparent looking and everything like that. But you can see that he's got sort of like these little flame accents and things like that.
Yeah, that's
it's a pretty cool figure there. And then let's see what else I got here. I pretty much just got one of each of what they had. So, and by the way, I did leave stuff for other people. I didn't just take everything they had in stock. I just took one of each. So there's Captain America. I do like the card back quite a bit. Very classic pose. And the figure itself looks very good. I think this is the only figure that comes with an accessory, by the way. I don't think any of the other figures actually come with an accessory, which is kind of interesting.
Well, I'm just glad to see he comes with a shield, because I remember as a kid, I was horrified because the Secret Wars Captain America didn't come with his actual shield.
Yeah, he came with the... Yeah. In fact, I think I still have that figure somewhere. I've got to go looking for it. I think I still have that figure, that Captain America from the Secret Wars line. Here's Magneto.
That's cool.
He's one of my favorites. I love the pose. Yeah. This is when I think of Magneto, this pose that you see on the card back, that's what I think of Magneto,
Yeah, it's very cool.
You can see the actual figure there.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I dig those. Those are neat.
So we got Magneto there. And I want to mention that these retail, in store at $9.99. Now, this is the one that I'm probably going to flip, as soon as I can. But it was there, so I got it.
Wow. Well, there you go. Carol Danvers. She should come in a 2-pack with Rogue.
That would be. I would love to see a Rogue version for this line. I think there's a lot of potential for this line. There's no doubt about it. There is tons and tons of potential for this line because there's just so many other figures they can come out with. Like I said, there is a Cyclops, but right now you can only get them in the 2-pack directly from Hasbro. So I'm really hoping that, I guess, my understanding is they're already up to phase 2 of this release. So there's actually going to be hopefully a phase 3. But a lot of people are thinking Cyclops, since he was already released with the Hasbro version, will come out, on a single carded version with a new card back. So there's plenty of speculation about that. But again, these are things that could be good quick flips for you, or if you can do what I'm going to do and wait until these figures are no longer available in stores and then see how the market is doing and then look into possibly flipping them at that point. Or, like I said, a couple of these I'm probably going to keep. I do also want to mention that Star Wars has a very similar line, right? I believe they call it the Vintage Collection. And so what Star Wars has done, Hasbro, I should say, has done with Star Wars is they've come out with new figures that are still at that same scale, that 3 3.25 scale. And basically what they've done is they put the packaging, the card back is supposed to be, basically evoke the late 70s, early 80s Kenner era card backs. But they're new figures and they've got new sculpting and all that kind of stuff. Then they also have sort of a retro line where they actually take like actual old figures, or they reimagine new figures as old figures. They're doing that with the Mandalorian. In fact, I still have an pre-order with Entertainment Earth. I'm still haven't got word whether that's going to be fulfilled or not. And that's basically the entire Mandalorian collection. But in stores now, the sort of new versions of the Mandalorian in that vintage line I'm now seeing them in stores. And I just thought it was interesting that the Star Wars figures at this same scale and basically the same thing where they're Kenner figures, they retail at $12.99, whereas these figures retail at $9.99. So that's also something to consider. I haven't looked into if these Star Wars figures are really going up in value or not, but I just thought it's interesting that as far as getting in at a low price point on something, the Marvel Kenner figures are cheaper than the Star Wars Kenner figures.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, myself as a collector, if they release like a Wolverine or something, I'd definitely be all over that. It'd be kind of cool too. Like, I tend to collect a lot of Namor stuff, so if they release the Submariner, like a really cool, like classic, because I don't think we've ever gotten just a really neat retro throwback, just classic Namor. Submariner figure. I mean, yeah, I know in the Legends line they did a pretty good one a few years ago, but we've just never had one of those. That'd be really cool. Kind of like how he looked when he showed up on was it Spider-Man's Amazing Friends? Yeah, he was an episode of Spider-Man's Amazing Friends. Just
Speaking of
that
which,
classic.
they do obviously have Spider-Man, and I mentioned they have Iceman. I'm really hoping they do a Firestar. I think that'd be really cool because Firestar never gets enough love.
Yeah, that would be really cool. That would definitely be really cool. They did a Marvel Legends. They did a classic Firestar, and she actually came with Miss Lion.
Oh, really?
Years ago. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I remember that the Toys R Us did an exclusive where they did actually have Spider-Man with Firestar and Iceman. And incidentally, I do have the comic. They did a one-shot revival of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends in the comics, and I have that one somewhere.
That's cool. Very cool. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about just for Collector's Corner, just briefly, just on the card standpoint, Eric and I were talking about this before the show, before we went live tonight. And it's interesting because basically it's interesting from the card standpoint. The Prism, I guess Prism's a company. I don't know enough about the sports card world, but I guess there's a company or a brand called Prism. They're getting ready to release their basketball cards. I think actually like tomorrow or later this week or something. But in advance of that, it's so weird because it seems like almost like in concern for the deluge of submissions they're going to get, PSA has basically announced that they've basically closed down all submissions for cards, all except for the Super Express tier that's like $300 a card. That's apparently all they're going to be doing, and they're supposed to be working through their backlog, which is good. But at the same point, it's weird because if they can make it through their backlog, maybe it means people could submit cards. But when they bring the tiers back on, I mean, everyone's pretty much thinking it's like, well, they're going to start with the most expensive tier and then work their way down to the value tier, right? So PSA just keeps punting that football further down the field as far as me ever submitting them my cards. So I'm getting to this point now where I'm like, well, maybe I just won't get my cards graded, and the extra ones I have, I'll just try and sell those just as they are, raw. And then, the ones I have, maybe somewhere down the road when no one cares as much about it, maybe then I can look at getting them graded. But it's just crazy to me that there's just so much turmoil and just craziness happening, in this weird little niche collectors market. At least that's what I think of. I mean, not from the sports card. I understand the sports card thing's a big thing. I don't mean that. I'm talking about from a comic book standpoint. It's just so weird to me. It's like it's just crazy that I can't just send my silly little Spider-Man card in and get it graded. It's just weird, just really weird. So anyhow, I wanted to bring that up for people who are following it. And to be honest with you, unless something happens, I don't know how much more trading card updates we're going to have on the show, because let's be honest, right now it looks like you're looking at a year, or longer to get anything graded, apparently by anybody at this point, it seems like. So I don't know what new news we're going to have other than, guess what? The wait's still out the ass, so I don't know what the point in continue to talk about it is. I mean, if I pick up something interesting, I still have a box I want to do an unboxing video for, but it just seems like as far as me getting cards graded and having all that fun stuff of unboxing stuff on the show, I don't know if that's ever going to happen at this point.
Yeah, it's a real shame what PSA is doing right now. The first indication of problems was when they, upped their rates. I know that was a big deal within the collecting card community. They're like, oh, great, they're putting their rates up. And now it's like, this is kind of crazy what they're doing, especially when there is such a demand right now for people wanting to get these cards graded. It seems like a huge missed opportunity on PSA's part. One thing I would suggest, though, is I do know that when it comes to some of the other companies, for whatever reasons that I don't understand, a lot of these other grading companies don't get the same respect, obviously, as PSA. In other words, even though they have a card that's graded at the same level as what a PSA grade is, just because it's a different company, they don't have the same value. They don't go for the same amount. But it might be worth looking into one of these other companies, because at some point maybe people will kind of turn on PSA. You never know; can always happen. I'm not saying it will happen, but maybe that is a possibility of looking at one of these other companies or these other grading companies and seeing both, in terms of the cost and also in terms of the turnaround time, if it might be worth getting a card or two graded, for one of the different companies, one of the competitors of PSA.
Well, and I have been looking into it, and I probably will still continue to look into it here and there. Um, but it's just weird because a lot of the companies they're still not even accepting, comic book cards is basically what I'm hearing. And I mean directly from reps too, not just from like people in the community going, oh well, they won't grade the cards. It's like, no, that person from such and such actually told me they won't grade those cards.
Right.
So it's weird how some companies are like, we don't want your money, we don't want it. So it's just a strange thing. I mean, and it's weird because, and I mentioned this to Eric, I mean, I almost feel like I should have just started a collectible grading company, instead of a t-shirt company, because Lord have mercy, there's a lot of demand for it, and people can't even pay money to get it done, it feels like at times. Well, I mean,
Yeah, it's crazy.
you can pay a truckload of money for it, you know what I mean? Like, you can pay $300 a card and get your cards graded, but it's just like a good affordable service doesn't seem to be something that anyone's too terribly interested in offering at the moment because of the crazy demand. And I'm just kind of surprised, and I'm sure there's aspects of their business I don't understand. So again, this is just my opinion, and I'm not meaning to sound heavy-handed. I'm mostly sounding disappointed, because I had hoped to be able to do this and share this experience with everyone here on the show, but it just looks like it's probably not happening anytime soon, if maybe ever. So,
yeah, it's really disappointing. It really is, especially for people that want to get into this market, because I know there's a lot of excitement about it, and there is a lot of speculation going on. And the fact that you can't even just get your card graded, that really does suck. That really is kind of like a huge bummer. But again, I do know there are some other companies that do grade these cards, because I've seen examples of that from other people's YouTube channels where they compare it. And of course, again, the PSA cards are always basically much more valuable than the other grading systems. But you never know; it might be worth it depending on how much they charge. And again, the turnaround time, that's also key.
true.